The frozen discovery. The wind howled across the ice-covered wasteland of Nova Terra, carrying the promise of a storm. Snow swirled in chaotic patterns, shifting and reforming like ghosts in the twilight. Tom Bridges pulled his hood tighter, his breath forming icy plumes in the freezing air. The harsh environment was nothing new to him. He had spent years surviving the unpredictable winters of this unforgiving colony world. Ajax, his loyal German shepherd, trotted ahead, his thick coat dusted with frost. Tom adjusted the straps of his pack, scanning the endless white expanse. He had been on his way back to his cabin, a sturdy structure built to withstand the brutal climate, when Ajax suddenly stopped. The dog's ears perked up, his nose working furiously. Then, without hesitation, he began digging into the snow. "What is it, boy?" Tom's voice was hoarse from the cold. Ajax let out a sharp bark and dug more frantically. Something buried beneath the snow. Tom felt his pulse quicken as he joined in, scooping away handfuls of ice. His gloves scraped against something solid, something that wasn't rock or ice. A shape emerged, a slender arm, then a shoulder. A body. Tom's heart pounded. He brushed away more snow until he could see a face, a woman's face. Her skin was an unnatural shade of blue, smooth as glass and eerily luminescent in the fading light. Her long, dark blue hair spread out around her like a frozen halo. Her lips, parted slightly, were pale, but her form was intact. If she had been human, she'd have succumbed to the cold long ago. "Damn," he muttered. "She's not human. No pulse. No breath." But something about her didn't feel lifeless. Making a snap decision, Tom scooped the fragile figure into his arms. She was surprisingly light. Ajax circled him anxiously as Tom turned toward the distant glow of his cabin. His muscles burned as he trudged through the snow, every step against the wind a battle. The storm was closing in fast. By the time they reached the cabin, the winds were howling like banshees. Tom shouldered the door open and stepped inside, the sudden warmth nearly making him stumble. He laid the woman on his bed, unfastening his thermal coat. Her form was still unnervingly still, but her skin, it wasn't as cold as it should have been. Could she still be alive? Tom stripped away the frozen remains of her clothing, revealing a bodysuit underneath that had intricate, unfamiliar patterns along its seams. He pulled thermal blankets over her, but he knew that wouldn't be enough. If she was hypothermic, she needed direct heat. His jaw tightened. There was only one way to warm her up fast enough. Without hesitation, he pulled off his outer layers and slipped into the blankets beside her, wrapping his arms around her cool body. Her skin was smooth like polished ice, but after a few moments, he swore he felt the faintest hint of warmth returning. "Come on," he whispered. "Stay with me." Ajax curled up beside them, adding his own warmth to the effort. The storm outside battered the cabin, but inside, a different battle was being fought, a battle for life. And then, after what felt like an eternity, the woman stirred. A faint gasp escaped her lips. Her body tensed against him, then relaxed slightly. Tom propped himself up just in time to see her eyes flutter open. They weren't human eyes. Her irises were a deep violet black, speckled with points of light, like a galaxy contained within them. Her gaze locked onto his, confusion and recognition warring within her expression. When she spoke, her voice was soft, fragile, but the words, translated through his earpiece, sent a chill down his spine. "You saved me." Then, as if the effort had drained her completely, she slipped back into unconsciousness. Tom exhaled slowly, running a hand through his damp hair. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Between ice and fire. The storm raged outside, battering the reinforced walls of the cabin with a relentless fury. Inside, the fire crackled in the hearth, casting long shadows over the room. Tom Bridges sat at the edge of his bed, watching the strange woman he had pulled from the snow. She was alive. That alone was a miracle. Her delicate features remained still, save for the faint rise and fall of her chest. Her skin, still cold to the touch, had started warming beneath the layers of thermal blankets. Ajax lay curled near her feet, watching her with alert brown eyes, his tail flicking occasionally. Tom exhaled, rubbing his temples. He had encountered all kinds of settlers, smugglers, and even outlaws on Nova Terra, but this was something different. She wasn't human. Her skin, her eyes, everything about her defied logic. Reaching for his handheld scanner, Tom hesitated for a moment before hovering it over her. The readings were strange. Her vitals were low but stable, and her body temperature was significantly below human norms, yet something in her biology was actively adapting. That's when she stirred. A soft sound escaped her lips, a whisper of a language that wasn't earthborn. Her fingers twitched, and then, with a sudden sharp inhale, her eyes fluttered open. Tom felt a jolt as he met that violet-black gaze again, those star-speckled irises reflecting the firelight. She wasn't afraid. Instead, she studied him, her expression unreadable. "You're awake," he said cautiously. Her gaze flickered across the room before settling back on him. The universal translator in his ear kicked in, processing the delicate sound of her voice. "You saved me." Tom gave a slow nod. "Yeah. You were half buried in the snow. I didn't think you'd make it." She shifted slightly, her breathing still shallow. Her dark blue hair, now dry, framed her face in silky waves. The warmth in the cabin had chased away the frost clinging to her, revealing a bodysuit of sleek, alien design beneath the torn remnants of her outerwear. She winced, pressing a hand to her temple. Her voice, though soft, carried an undeniable strength beneath it. Tom leaned forward. "Easy. You need to recover." She closed her eyes briefly, as if recalibrating. When she opened them again, they locked onto his with renewed focus. "Where am I?" "My cabin. Nova Terra. Outskirts of the frontier colony," Tom said, studying her reaction. "You crash." She hesitated. "I was separated from my vessel." "Your ship." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached up and touched her throat, wincing slightly. It wasn't just exhaustion, something was affecting her ability to speak. Tom stood and grabbed a mug from the nearby counter, pouring a careful amount of heated water into it. He brought it over, kneeling beside the bed. "Here. Drink." She stared at it, then at him. For a moment, he wondered if she even recognized the gesture. Then, slowly, she reached out with long, slender fingers. Their hands brushed. Tom sucked in a quiet breath. Her skin was cool against his, but beneath that coolness, there was something else, a strange, tingling warmth, like static energy just beneath the surface. She took the cup and sipped hesitantly. After a moment, she swallowed, then let out a slow exhale. The tension in her shoulders eased, and for the first time, her gaze softened. "You are not like the others," she murmured. Tom frowned. "Others?" Again, she hesitated, then turned her gaze toward the window, where the wind howled against the glass. She was afraid. Tom followed her gaze, his instincts kicking in. "Someone chasing you?" Silence. Then, very softly, she said, "They will come." A chill that had nothing to do with the cold crept down Tom's spine. Ajax let out a low growl. Tom reached for his rifle. The storm outside wasn't the only danger coming their way. The hunt begins. The wind screamed against the walls of the cabin, rattling the windows with each powerful gust. Tom Bridges tightened his grip on his rifle, his gaze locked onto the woman in his bed. "They will come." Her words hung in the air, heavier than the weight of the storm outside. She wasn't just lost. She was being hunted. Ajax stood near the door, ears perked, body tense. He could sense it too. Tom exhaled slowly, forcing his heartbeat to steady. Who's after you? The woman hesitated, her fingers tightening around the thermal blanket. They are called the Varric. A war faction. Hunters of those they deem unworthy. Tom's jaw tightened. He had heard whispers of the Varric in the colony network, an aggressive, expansionist alien race that didn't tolerate weakness. They weren't interested in diplomacy. They conquered, they enslaved, and they exterminated. He studied her again. And you're on their hit list? She nodded. My people are different from them. We value knowledge, not war. But to the Varric, that makes us weak. Her voice turned bitter. They destroy what they cannot control. Tom's grip on his rifle tightened. They tracking you? She exhaled, closing her eyes briefly. They must have followed my escape pod. I was disoriented when I landed. The cold drained my energy faster than I expected. I could not reach shelter before the storm hit. Tom muttered a curse under his breath. If the Varric were coming, that meant trouble, serious trouble. He glanced toward the reinforced steel plating over his windows. The cabin was sturdy, but against an alien war party? It wouldn't last. We need to move. She looked up at him, her violet-black eyes filled with unreadable emotion. Move where? There's a canyon 2 miles south. If we can reach it before the storm clears, we'll have cover. A natural defense. Tom was already mentally mapping their escape route. We won't last here if they come in force. She hesitated. You don't have to help me. Tom huffed. Lady, I already saved your life. What kind of person would I be if I left you to die now? Something flickered in her expression. Surprise? Gratitude? He wasn't sure. I don't even know your name, he added. She hesitated, then said softly, Kyra. Tom nodded. All right, Kyra. Can you walk? She sat up, testing her strength. A wince flickered across her face, but she nodded. Yes. Good. Get dressed. We're leaving in 5 minutes. Ajax let out a low, warning growl. Tom turned sharply toward the window. In the distance, through the whiteout of the storm, something moved. A shadow against the swirling snow. His stomach turned to ice. They were out of time. The Varric were already here. Escape into the storm. The wind howled like a wounded animal as Tom Bridges threw open the storage crate, yanking out extra thermal gear. His hands moved fast, instincts taking over. The Varric were out there, hunting, and if they stayed, they wouldn't last long. He tossed a heavy insulated coat toward Kyra. Put this on. She hesitated for only a second before slipping into the oversized gear. It dwarfed her slender frame, but it would keep her alive. She fumbled with the zipper, her fingers still sluggish from the cold. Tom grabbed his rifle and checked the power cell. Fully charged. Ajax stood by the door, ears flat, muscles tensed. The dog could sense them, whoever or whatever was closing in through the blizzard. Tom moved to the window, pressing his back against the wooden beam beside it. He risked a glance. Through the storm, dark figures moved in the snow. 6, maybe 7 of them. Their shapes were barely visible, distorted by the swirling wind. But Tom knew what he was looking at. Hunters. Damn it, he muttered. Kyra was already moving toward him. Varric? Tom nodded grimly. They're fanning out. Searching. Her fingers tightened around the fabric of her borrowed coat. They won't stop. They never do. Tom glanced at her. How do they track you? Kyra hesitated. Then, reluctantly, she pulled back the sleeve of her bodysuit. Beneath the fabric, embedded in her skin, a faintly glowing device pulsed with a soft blue light. A tracker. Tom let out a slow breath. Of course. Makes it easy for them. I tried to disable it when I escaped, Kyra said, her voice tight. But it's genetically encoded. Cutting it out would kill me. Tom clenched his jaw. They weren't just hunting her. They already knew exactly where she was. No time. They had to move. He yanked a small metal device from his pocket and tossed it to her. Jammer. Stick it over the tracker. Should scramble their signal long enough to lose them. Kyra caught it, her eyes flickering with something unreadable. Without hesitation, she pressed it over the glowing implant. The device hissed softly, and the light in her arm dimmed. Tom slung his pack over his shoulder. Let's go. Kyra pulled the hood over her head, cinching it tight. Ajax whined but stayed close, his large paws already shifting toward the door. Tom cracked the door open. A gust of freezing wind slammed into them, cutting through even the thickest of layers. Snow pelted his face like needles. They stepped outside. The cabin vanished behind them as they pushed through the storm, their tracks quickly erased by the relentless wind. The hunt begins. They moved fast, heading south toward the canyon. Tom led the way, keeping his rifle raised, eyes scanning for movement through the blinding snowfall. Kyra stumbled once, catching herself against a jagged outcrop of ice. Tom grabbed her arm, steadying her. Stay close, he ordered. She nodded, her breath coming in rapid bursts. Then, a sound cut through the wind. A deep, metallic click. Tom's instincts screamed. He dove to the side, dragging Kyra with him. A fraction of a second later. A bolt of plasma ripped through the air, hitting the ground where they had just been standing. Ajax barked wildly. Tom rolled, raising his rifle. A figure emerged through the storm. It was Varric. Their exoskeletal armor gleamed in the dim light, their predatory eyes glowing faintly beneath their helmet visors. They were built like machines, brutal and efficient. Tom didn't wait. He fired first. The energy bolt slammed into the Varric's shoulder, sending them stumbling back. But they didn't go down. Their armor absorbed the worst of it. They raised their weapon. Tom fired again. This time, he aimed for the neck. The Varric dropped. But there were more. Kyra yanked at his arm. We have to go. More shadows moved in the blizzard, dark shapes advancing with deadly precision. Tom grabbed Kyra's hand and ran. The canyon was close. If they could reach it, they might stand a chance. The snowstorm swallowed them as they fled, with death chasing at their heels. Into the abyss. The snowstorm raged around them, thick and suffocating, as Tom Bridges pulled Kyra forward, every step a battle against the wind. Ajax ran alongside them, his keen instincts guiding him through the blinding white haze. Behind them, the Varric were closing in. Tom's boots crunched against the ice as they neared the edge of the canyon. A deep, jagged rift in the landscape, carved over centuries by glacial winds. He had only been here once before, it was dangerous, unpredictable. But it was their best shot. He turned his head, catching a glimpse of dark figures moving fast through the storm. The Varric were hunters. They wouldn't stop until they had their prey. We're running out of ground. Kyra gasped. Tom didn't slow down. He pulled a flare from his belt and ignited it, casting a red glow through the swirling snow. He threw it toward the canyon edge, not to signal for help, but to get a better look. The drop was steep. Too steep. Damn it, he muttered. The canyon walls stretched down into a fog of swirling frost. Climbing down would be impossible under these conditions. Kyra grabbed his arm. We can't stop here. Tom's mind raced. They needed another way down. Then, he spotted it, a narrow, ice-covered slope leading to a lower ledge. It wasn't much, but it was better than standing here waiting to be slaughtered. He turned to Kyra. You trust me? Her violet-black eyes locked onto his. A single heartbeat passed. Yes. Then hold on. Without another word, Tom grabbed her, pulled her close, and jumped. The fall. The world tilted as they slid down the ice-covered slope. The wind screamed past them, the sheer cold biting into their skin. Tom gritted his teeth, using his boots to slow their descent. Ajax barked from above, then, without hesitation, leapt after them. The ledge rushed up to meet them. Tom twisted his body at the last second, landing hard against the ice. Kyra tumbled beside him, gasping, but unhurt. Ajax landed next, his claws scraping against the frozen rock before he found his footing. For a moment, they lay still. Alive. Tom exhaled sharply, his breath turning to mist. That was fun. Kyra rolled onto her back, eyes wide. You call that fun? No, but if I say it was terrifying, I might lose my nerve for the next crazy thing we have to do. Kyra let out a breathless laugh. It was the first time he had seen her smile. Then, movement above. The Varric had reached the edge. Tom tensed. They wouldn't follow, they couldn't. Their heavy armor made them too slow, too bulky to survive a descent like that. But they weren't giving up. One of the Varrics stepped forward, raising something metallic. Tom's stomach sank. A thermal charge. They weren't going to follow. They were going to bury them. Kyra, move. The explosion detonated above them, sending a massive shockwave through the canyon. The ice trembled. Cracked. Then, it collapsed. The ledge beneath them gave way. And they fell. The depths of the unknown. Tom's world turned upside down as they plunged into darkness. The canyon swallowed them whole. Wind and ice roared past his ears. He barely had time to process what was happening before. Impact. The force of it sent shockwaves through his body. He hit something, soft, but freezing. Snow. Tom groaned, forcing his eyes open. Everything was dim, bathed in an eerie blue glow. The storm above was distant now, muffled by the depth of the canyon. Ajax's frantic barking cut through the silence. Tom pushed himself up, his muscles screaming in protest. Kyra. He turned, his heart pounding, then saw her. She was alive, sprawled just a few feet away, half buried in the snow. Her breathing was shallow. Tom scrambled to her side, brushing the frost from her face. Hey. Stay with me. Her eyes fluttered open. We're still alive. Barely. Tom sat back, trying to get a sense of where they had landed. The ground beneath them was different, smooth, crystalline ice, reflecting an unnatural glow. That's when he noticed something strange. They weren't in just any canyon. The walls around them were etched with alien symbols, glowing faintly beneath the frost. Kyra saw it too. Her breath hitched. This place. Tom's pulse quickened. They hadn't just escaped the Varric. They had fallen into something older. Something hidden. And something was waiting in the dark. Beneath the ice. Tom Bridges forced himself to his feet, ignoring the sharp ache in his ribs. The fall had rattled every part of his body, but he was alive. That counted for something. His breath misted in the cold air as he turned in a slow circle, taking in their surroundings. The canyon floor wasn't what he had expected. The ground beneath them was smooth, almost glass-like ice, but it wasn't just ice. It was structured. Tom flicked his eyes toward her. The who? She barely breathed the words. The first ones. The architects of the stars. Tom wasn't sure what was worse, the fact that she sounded odd, or the fact that she sounded terrified. One of the figures stepped forward, its movements impossibly smooth, almost weightless. Its eyes, *** if it had eyes, were hidden beneath a crystalline mask. When it spoke, the sound was not a voice, but a presence, vibrating in the air around them. "You are not of our kind." Tom clenched his jaw. "No kidding." The figure tilted its head, as if studying him. Then its gaze shifted to Kyra. "Blood of the forgotten. You walk among the ruins of your ancestors." Kyra's breath hitched. You know my people." A long silence followed. The cavern itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, a single word. "Exiled." Tom's grip on his rifle tightened. The way the figure said it, not with anger, but with finality. Like a truth written in the bones of the universe. Kyra's voice was barely above a whisper. "Why?" The figure's crystalline form flickered, as if shifting between states of reality. Then, slowly, it raised a single translucent hand and pointed toward her arm. "The tracker." Tom's stomach dropped. "You have been marked by the destroyers." "The Varric." Kyra stiffened. "I didn't choose that." The figure's form rippled with light. "Choice is an illusion. Consequence is not." Tom had had enough. He took a step forward, putting himself between Kyra and the Ancient. "Listen, I don't know what kind of cryptic wisdom you're trying to drop on us, but we didn't come here looking for trouble. We're just trying to survive." The figure tilted its head again, as if considering. Then, for the first time, it moved closer. It reached out. Tom didn't move. The Ancient's hand hovered over his chest for a moment, then, without touching him, it glowed. A pulse of energy shot through Tom's entire body. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, he saw things. A sky filled with burning stars. A war waged in silence, whole planets torn apart by an unseen force. And at the center of it all, something vast, something waiting. Then, just as quickly as it started, it was gone. Tom stumbled back, gasping. Kyra grabbed his arm. "Tom." He shook his head, trying to clear the images from his mind. What the hell was that?" The Ancient's voice vibrated through the air again. "The destroyers are coming." Tom's blood ran cold. "They already found us," he muttered. The Ancient let out a sound, a low, resonating hum that could have been sorrow. Then, without warning, the cavern shook. A blast echoed from above. Distant, but getting closer. Tom's instincts kicked in. "That's not good." Kyra turned toward the Ancient. "Can you help us?" Another silence. Then, finally, "No." Kyra's face hardened. "Then why let us live?" The Ancient flickered, its form beginning to fade, dissolving into the ice. "Because you must choose." And then, it was gone. The cavern went dark. Tom swore under his breath. "I hate riddles." Then, another explosion. Closer. Ajax barked wildly. Kyra turned toward Tom, her eyes burning with something new. "They found us." Tom exhaled sharply, gripping his rifle. The Varric were coming. And this time, there was nowhere left to run. The last stand. The cavern trembled as another explosion thundered from above. Chunks of ice and rock broke loose, crashing down around them. Ajax barked, circling restlessly, sensing the danger closing in. Tom Bridges clenched his jaw, gripping his rifle as the weight of the moment settled on him. They had nowhere left to run. The Varric were above them, sealing every escape route. The Ancients had vanished, leaving them with nothing but cryptic words. Beside him, Kyra stood motionless, her violet-black eyes flickering with unspoken thoughts. She had just learned her people, her ancestors, had been exiled from this place. She had asked for help and been denied. Now, they were on their own. Tom exhaled sharply. "All right. We're done running." Kyra turned to him. "What do you mean?" He jerked his chin toward the darkness of the cavern ahead. They think they've got us trapped. Let's prove them wrong. Her gaze flickered with understanding. You have a plan? Tom checked his rifle, then slung his pack onto the ground, rifling through it. Not much of one. But if I know war parties, they'll send scouts first. Sweep the area. If we can thin their numbers before they push in. We make it costly for them, Kyra finished. Tom nodded. Exactly. She hesitated, then flexed her fingers. A faint pulse of blue energy crackled at her fingertips. There might be another way, she murmured. Tom raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. She turned, gazing at the glowing symbols on the walls. This place, it still holds power. The ancients didn't just build shelters. They built defenses. Tom frowned. You're saying you can use it? Kyra bit her lip, hesitant. I don't know. I was never trained in the old ways. But if I can connect with it, if I can wake it up. Tom didn't let her finish. Do it. She hesitated. What if I fail? He gave her a half smirk. Then we'll go with plan A. Shoot anything that comes through that door. She exhaled, then nodded. Keep them off me. The siege begins. Tom moved quickly, placing himself behind a natural ridge of ice. He motioned for Ajax to stay low, then aimed his rifle toward the cavern entrance. Then, he heard it. The first Varric scout slipped through the darkness. The alien was cautious, its sleek armor blending into the shadows. Tom could just barely make out the dim glow of its visor. It crept forward, weapon raised, silent, deadly. Tom exhaled. Wait for it. Another step. Then another. Then, he fired. The energy bolt slammed into the Varric's neck. The alien gurgled, stumbling forward before collapsing into the ice. Silence. Then, a guttural growl echoed from the cavern entrance. More of them. Tom gritted his teeth. So much for stealth. He fired again, hitting another figure just as the first wave of Varric burst into the chamber. They were fast. Too fast. Tom ducked behind cover as return fire tore through the cavern, sending shards of ice flying. Ajax barked, staying low, his instincts keeping him just out of harm's way. Tom stole a glance toward Kyra. She was kneeling now, her hands pressed against the ancient symbols on the walls. The markings were glowing brighter, pulsing with raw energy. But she was struggling. Sweat beaded on her brow. Her hands trembled. Come on, Kyra, Tom muttered. The Varric were advancing. Tom fired again, aiming for weak spots in their armor. He took down another, but they were too many. He was running out of time. Then, something changed. The cavern hummed. A deep, resonating sound, like a heartbeat beneath the ice. Tom barely had time to react before the symbols on the walls flared to life. The awakening. A wave of energy erupted from the walls, sending shockwaves through the cavern. The Varric screamed, staggering backward as the power pulsed outward. Their armor flickered, shorting out, sparks dancing across their bodies. Tom felt the hair on his arms rise. The entire chamber was waking up. Kyra gasped, her body trembling as she struggled to stay upright. She was connected now, linked to something older than any of them. She turned her gaze to the advancing Varric. And she raised her hand. The ice beneath the aliens cracked. Then, in a single, earth-shattering moment, the ground gave way. Tom watched as the Varric, the hunters who had chased them across the frozen wasteland, fell into the abyss below. Their screams vanished into the depths. Then, silence. The cavern stopped shaking. The symbols on the walls dimmed. The air settled, heavy with the weight of what had just happened. Tom slowly lowered his rifle, breathing hard. Ajax whimpered softly, stepping closer. He turned to Kyra. She was barely standing. Her face was pale, her body shaking. She had done it. But at what cost? Tom reached her just as her legs gave out. He caught her, lowering her gently to the ice. Her breath was shallow. Did we win? Tom let out a breathless laugh. You tell me. She smiled weakly. I told you, this place still had power. Tom shook his head in disbelief. Remind me never to doubt you again. She let out a soft chuckle, then closed her eyes. Tom exhaled, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. They had survived. For now. A new path. Hours later, after ensuring the Varric were truly gone, Tom and Kyra sat at the cavern's edge, watching the storm above begin to clear. Kyra's strength was returning, slowly. Tom glanced at her. So what now? She gazed at the glowing remnants of the ancient markings, her expression thoughtful. My people were exiled from this place, but they never knew why. Tom nodded. Think you have an answer now? She turned to him, a small smile forming. I think. I have a purpose. Tom raised an eyebrow. Care to share? She took a slow breath. The Varric won't stop. Not just with me, but with my people, with anyone they see as weak. This place, these powers, maybe we can use them. Maybe, we can fight back. Tom studied her, then smirked. So, what you're saying is, you want to start a rebellion? Kyra's star-filled eyes gleamed. I'm saying we already have. Tom chuckled, shaking his head. Humans and aliens. Guess we make a good team. She met his gaze. Better than that. We make history. Above them, the storm was fading. The first hints of dawn broke across the icy sky. And in that moment, Tom realized, this wasn't just survival anymore. This was the beginning of something much, much bigger. A fire in the cold. The dawn light spread across the icy horizon, painting the snow-covered landscape in hues of soft amber and pale blue. The storm had finally passed, leaving a world transformed. Tom Bridges stood at the cavern's entrance, staring out over the frozen wasteland that had nearly claimed their lives. Beside him, Kyra sat on a smooth ridge of ice, her breathing slow but steady. The exhaustion of what she had done was still etched into her face. Ajax sat at her feet, his ears perked, watching the horizon with the quiet alertness of a guardian who knew the danger wasn't entirely over. Tom exhaled through his nose, tightening the strap of his rifle. So, you really think we can do this? Kyra turned her violet-black eyes to him. What choice do we have? She wasn't wrong. The Varric weren't the kind to let failure go unanswered. They would regroup. They would come back, with more forces, more weapons. And when they did, this place, this lost sanctuary, could become the spark of something bigger. Tom studied the crystalline structures lining the cavern walls. The ancients had left behind something powerful. Something still waiting to be fully understood. And Kyra, somehow, some way, was connected to it. He turned back to her. We can't stay here forever. We need supplies. Weapons. Allies. Kyra nodded slowly. I know. And my people. I don't know if they'll listen, but they need to know the truth. Tom ran a hand through his damp hair. That's a problem for another day. He paused, then smirked. Right now, I'm just happy I didn't freeze to death dragging your unconscious body through a snowstorm. Kyra let out a soft chuckle, shaking her head. You saved me, she murmured. Not just back there. Not just when you found me in the snow. Tom raised an eyebrow. Yeah. What do you call it, then? She studied him for a long moment before answering. A beginning. For a second, there was nothing but the silence between them, a quiet understanding. Then Ajax barked, and Tom exhaled sharply, shoving his rifle onto his back. All right then. We've got work to do. Kyra pulled herself up, standing beside him, the pale morning light casting a glow on her blue skin. She was different now. Stronger. Determined. No longer just a survivor, but something more. Together, they took one last look at the ruins behind them. The power of the past waiting to be reclaimed. Then they turned and walked forward, toward a future they were about to build with their own hands. And as the cold winds howled around them, a fire had been lit. One that would never be extinguished.